in 1663, New France had been proclaimed a royal province under a new king. Newly crowned, this young monarch already dreamed of creating a great empire, and he did not want to inaugurate his reign by losing his colony in the New World. Changes were made. The colony would now report directly to him and the royal administration through a governor and an intendant. Things would finally improve in New France under the energetic reign of King Louis XIV, the monarch that helped usher in the golden age of New France.
France and England in North America, Count Frontenac, New France, Louis XIV, 1620 to 1672. The most remarkable man who ever represented the crown of France in the New World was Count Frontenac. In 1669, a Venetian embassy came to France to beg for aid against the Turks, who for more than 2 years had attacked Candia in overwhelming force. The ambassadors offered to place their own troops under French command, and they asked Turenne to name a general officer equal to the task. Frontenac had the signal honor of being chosen by the first soldier of Europe for this most arduous and difficult position. He went accordingly. The result increased his reputation for ability and courage, but Candia was doomed, and its chief fortress fell into the hands of the infidels after a protracted struggle which is said to have cost them 180,000 men. 3 years later, Frontenac received the appointment of governor and lieutenant general for the king in all New France. He was a man of excellent parts, living much in society and completely ruined. He found it hard to bear the imperious temper of his wife, and he was given the government of Canada to deliver him from her and afford him some means of living. Certain scandalous songs of the day assign a different motive for his appointment. Louis XIV was enamored of Madame de Montespan. She had once smiled upon Frontenac, and it is said that the jealous king gladly embraced the opportunity of removing from his presence and from hers a lover who had forestalled him. Frontenac at Quebec, 1672 to 1675. Frontenac was 52 years old when he landed at Quebec. If time had done little to cure his many faults, it had done nothing to weaken the springs of his unconquerable vitality. In his ripe middle age he was as keen, fiery, and perversely headstrong as when he quarreled with Préfontaine in the hall at Saint-Fargeau. Had nature disposed him to melancholy, there was much in his position to awaken it. A man of courts and camps, born and bred in the focus of a most gorgeous civilization, he was banished to the ends of the earth, among savage hordes and half-reclaimed forests, to exchange the splendors of Saint-Germain and the dawning glories of Versailles for a stern grey rock, haunted by sombre priests, rugged merchants and traders, blanketed Indians and wild bushrangers. But Frontenac was a man of action. He wasted no time in vain regrets, and set himself to his work with the elastic vigor of youth. His first impressions had been very favorable. When he had sailed up the St. Lawrence, the basin of Quebec opened before him, his imagination kindled with the grandeur of the scene. "I never," he wrote, "saw anything more superb than the position of this town. It could not be better situated as the future capital of a great empire." That Quebec was to become the capital of a great empire there seemed in truth good reason to believe. The young king and his minister Colbert had labored in earnest to build up a new France in the West. For years past, shiploads of immigrants had landed every summer on the strand beneath the rock. All was life and action, and the air was full of promise. The royal agent Talon had written to his master, "This part of the French monarchy is destined to a grand future. All that I see around me points to it, and the colonies of foreign nations so long settled on the seaboard are trembling with fright in view of what His Majesty has accomplished here within the last 7 years. The measures we have taken to confine them with narrow limits, and the prior claim we have established against them by formal acts of possession, do not permit them to extend themselves except at peril of having war declared against them as usurpers, and this, in fact, is what they seem greatly to fear." Frontenac shared the spirit of the hour. His first step was to survey his government. He talked with traders, colonists, and officials, visited seigneuries, farms, fishing stations, and all the infant industries that Talon had galvanized into life, examined the new ship on the stocks, admired the structure of the new brewery, went to Three Rivers to see the iron mines, and then, having acquired a tolerably exact idea of his charge, returned to Quebec. He was well pleased with what he saw, but not with the ways and means of Canadian travel. for he thought it was strangely unbecoming that a lieutenant general of the king should be forced to crouch on a sheet of bark at the bottom of a birch canoe, scarcely daring to move his head to the right or left lest he should disturb the balance of the fragile vessel. At Quebec he convoked the council, made them a speech, and administered the oath of allegiance. This did not satisfy him. He resolved that all Quebec should take the oath together. It was little but a pretext. Like many of his station, Frontenac was not in full sympathy with the centralizing movement of the time, which tended to level ancient rights, privileges, and prescriptions under the ponderous roller of the monarchical administration. He looked back with regret to the day when the three orders of the state, clergy, nobles, and commons, had a place and a power in the direction of national affairs. The three orders still subsisted in form, if not in substance, in some of the provinces of France, and Frontenac conceived the idea of reproducing them in Canada. Not only did he cherish the tradition of fated liberties, but he loved pomp and circumstance above all, when he was himself the central figure in it, and the thought of a royal governor of Languedoc or Brittany presiding over the estates of his province appears to have fired him with emulation. He had no difficulty in forming his order of the clergy. The Jesuits and the seminary priests supplied material even more abundant than he wished. For the order of the nobles, he found 3 or 4 gentilshommes at Quebec, and these he reinforced with a number of officers. The third estate consisted of the merchants and citizens, and he formed the members of the council and the magistrates into another distinct body, though, properly speaking, they belonged to the third estate, of which by nature and prescription they were the head. The Jesuits, glad no doubt to lay him under some slight obligation, lent him their church for the ceremony that he meditated, and aided in decorating it for the occasion. Here, on the 23rd of October, 1672, the 3 estates of Canada were convoked, with as much pomp and splendor as circumstances would permit. Then Frontenac, with the ease of a man of the world and the loftiness of a grand seigneur, delivered himself of the harangue he had prepared. He wrote it exceedingly well. He is said also to have excelled as an orator. Certainly he was never averse to the tones of his own eloquence. His speech was addressed to a double audience, the throng that filled the church and the king and the minister 3,000 miles away. He told his hearers that he had called the assembly, not because he doubted their loyalty, but in order to afford them the delight of making public protestation of devotion to a prince, the terror of whose irresistible arms was matched only by the charms of his person and the benignity of his rule. "The Holy Scriptures," he said, "command us to obey our sovereign and teach us that no pretext or reason can dispense us from his obedience." And in a glowing eulogy on Louis XIV, he went on to show that obedience to him was not only a duty, but an inestimable privilege. He dwelt with admiration on the recent victories in Holland, and held forth the hope that a speedy and glorious peace would leave His Majesty free to turn his thoughts to the colony which already owed so much to his fostering care. "The true means," pursued Frontenac, "of gaining his favor and his support, is for us to unite with one heart in laboring for the progress of Canada." Then he addressed in turn the clergy, the nobles, the magistrates, and the citizens. He exhorted the priests to continue with zeal their labors for the conversion of the Indians, and to make them subjects not only of Christ but also of the King. In short, to tame and civilize them, a portion of their duties in which he plainly gave them to understand that they had not hitherto acquitted themselves to his satisfaction. Next he appealed to the nobles, commended their gallantry, and called upon them to be as assiduous in the culture and improvement of the colony as they were valiant in its defense. The magistrates, the merchants, and the colonists in general were each addressed in an appropriate exhortation. "I can assure you, messieurs," he concluded, "that if you faithfully discharge your several duties, each in his station, His Majesty will extend to us all the help and all the favor that we can desire. It is needless, then, to urge you to act as I have counseled, since it is for your own interest to do so. As for me, it only remains to protest before you that I shall esteem myself happy in consecrating all my efforts, and if need be my life itself, to extending the empire of Jesus Christ throughout all this land, and the supremacy of our King over all the nations that dwell in it." He administered the oath, and the assembly dissolved.